It's been 4 years since The Get Down got canceled, and if I'm being dead honest, I'm still crossed about it. I will never understand why Netflix decided to pull the plug on this show when it only lasted for just one season. For just one pissing season. But anyways, with this show taking place during the 1970s in South Bronx, the show's about 4 friends who go through many hardships during the burning of the Bronx crisis, but with the guidance of their mentor Shalan Fantastic, they learn that they can overcome anything if they put their mind to it. The show heavily incorporated the arts into its plot, referencing the origin of hip-hop, along with graffiti culture that was taking place in the South Bronx during this time period. The show was such a great combination of being a compelling drama while also sort of being a musical because the music always brought me in and the storylines always kept me coming back for more. And after seeing the series finale, I was very psyched to see where things were going to go in season 2 just to see how everything was going to pan out. Only to receive the news that the show got canceled and my soul was just absolutely crushed. Like, I will just never ever forgive Netflix for canceling The Get Down because it was such a good ass show, but they really dropped the ball on this one. Now, for a guy like me who is a huge sucker for coming-of-age stories, On My Block is definitely a show that resonates with me a lot. And while sure, I'm not exactly much of a Netflix guy, I just remember being so instantly infatuated for how realistic and how endearing the show is. And not only that, the comedy in the show is just superb because they never fall flat for me, nor did they ever fail to make me laugh. The show is about 4 childhood friends who are about to enter high school while living in the rough streets of South Central LA. The characters in the show are super relatable because I literally can't name a character in the show who doesn't come off to be interesting or one-dimensional. Even the characters who don't even show up on the show most of the time. I really adore how realistic the show is, especially how it deals with racism, most particularly from the Black and Hispanic community with a sense of urgency and vulnerability. On My Block tells an amazing story about amazing characters who are diverse and represent their communities in a positive way rather than a very stereotypical way, which is something I really like. The characters are more than just their race and ethnicity. They're complex characters who make us feel empathy and sometimes even anger. Overall, On My Block is a show that is genuinely charming and has such a magnificent way of dealing with character development, especially how it proves that you can find a family within your friends. And after seeing the season 3 finale, I'm very stoked to see where things go from there. Now, Supernatural is one of those shows that became an instant favorite of mine. I'll never forget just finishing high school, and I remember being so heavily invested in this show really quickly and just saying to myself, man, why didn't I watch this show sooner? Because it's so fucking good. The show's all about 2 brothers, Sam and Dean Winchester, who travel town to town, city to city to face off against ghouls, ghosts, demons, vampires, gods, etc., etc. The story arcs in the show are always so intriguing because the way how everything beautifully connects in the end, especially when it has good enough drama and conflicts, which always keeps the pace going. Even with Supernatural being very dark and usually scary most of the time, it can also be very funny at times because the humor in the show is just top notch. Like, it just never fails to crack me up. I can honestly keep going on and on about this show, but all I gotta say is if you're someone like me who's into fantasy, mystery, or horror, then Supernatural is definitely the show for you. Even with the show's title being called Regular Show, it was anything besides regular. In my opinion, I feel like this was one of the shows that helped shape the modern cartoon era along with Adventure Time, because I remember when both shows came around the same time and it blew everybody away, including myself. What made Regular Show so awesome is that it was so unapologetically weird and bizarre because it always provided a variety of interesting and very hilarious situations. I absolutely adored how the characters of the show were able to evolve throughout the series and fully understand each other. Plus, the creator of the show and the voice of Mordecai, J.G. Quintel, really had fantastic taste in music because of his use of music throughout the series from like the 60s to the 80s. It provided some unique animation and solid morals for the viewers to understand, and honestly, what more could be said? Regular Show was funny, smart, and is such an inventive show that had such a clever way of combining adult humor along with child humor superbly. Smallville was a show that I absolutely adored when I was much younger. The main benefit of portraying a character in a TV show versus a film is the amount of time you get to spend with the character. And this is very true when it comes to Smallville. While Christopher Reeves' portrayal to me is the standard when it comes to Superman, Tom Welling's Superman is what made me love the character. It's a show that ran for 10 years from 2001 to 2011 as it chronicled the early years of Clark Kent before he became Superman. There were so many things about Smallville that were so endearing. It wasn't just Clark's wonderful character development alone, it also had Clark's wonderful relationship with his parents. But the real highlight of the entire show was undoubtedly Clark's friendship with Lex Luthor. The series did such an impeccable job by showcasing their relationship, how they initially start off as being very good friends to eventually becoming bitter enemies within the later seasons. And I gotta say, Michael Rosenbaum to this day still remains the best Lex Luthor we've gotten thus far, because with his incredible performance, he did such an incredible job of showcasing Lex' descent on becoming evil, especially the way he brought so much sympathy to the character. The relationship worked so well with Tom Welling's Clark Kent because it ultimately made for a great dynamic between the two characters, and it raised the show into one of the best comic book series ever put to screen. Although I'm not gonna lie, the series finale for me was such a huge letdown because it just felt so unearned and just very underwhelming, considering the fact that it was gonna lead to something very big. It felt like it was gonna have a great payoff after the show having a decade-long run. But instead, I was just very disappointed than I was satisfied because it just felt so flat. And I remember just saying to myself, like, man, they could have done so much better than that. But regardless of all that, Smallville is definitely one of the best live-action shows ever produced. It's a show that's so groundbreaking that it paved the way for future DC shows like Arrow, Flash, Gotham, Supergirl, Arrowverse, Superman and Lois, etc., etc. That just goes to show how Smallville has become so influential over time. When there's trouble, you know who to call. Teen Titans! Man, that never gets old. Now, this is a show that brings back great memories from my childhood. I remember adoring this show when I was much younger just because it was a show about superheroes. But upon rewatching this show several years ago, I've come to realize that it's way better than I remember it to be, because it wasn't just a show about superheroes. It was a show all about friendship and character development. Teen Titans had such an excellent way of exploring all the characters on the show to not only see what makes them very distinct from each other, but to see what makes all of them so special. And because of that, it made me care about all 5 of the main characters on the show: Robin, Raven, Cyborg, Starfire, and my absolute favorite, Beast Boy. The more they all learned about each other, they didn't just become a better team, they also became better friends. And while sure, like all friendships, there were times where they were at each other's necks and they definitely had their disagreements, but at the end of the day, they always had each other's backs because, you know, that's what friends are for. The Terra story arc was without question my absolute favorite part of the entire show, because it was very great to see a very tragic character like her who transitions to being a member of the Teen Titans, to betraying the Teen Titans by becoming Slade's apprentice, to breaking free from Slade and dying a true hero in the end. And I gotta say, the show did such an incredible job by executing the Judas contract by not only approving upon it, but making a better adaptation than it was in the comics, especially when it came to seeing the beautiful relationship between Terra and Beast Boy, which was very sincere. Even though to this day, it really broke my heart the way the show ended under very underwhelming circumstances, considering the fact that it was supposed to go on for 6 seasons when it got canceled after 5. And it's even more frustrating that they relaunched the show with the god-awful reboot Teen Titans Go. But with all that aside, Teen Titans definitely had a great run during its time. It was a total package that just had a bit of everything, from brilliant storytelling to complex characters, and also good enough humor that always kept me intrigued with it.
You're not the boss of me now. You're not the boss of me now.
Now, there are lots of reasons why I love Malcolm in the Middle, not just because it's a great sitcom that felt a lot different from most sitcoms that I've watched in the past, because of how realistic and how relatable it is, how it showed you the everyday life of a very dysfunctional lower middle class family, with the third-born child, Malcolm, being the main focus of the entire series. What made Malcolm in the Middle such a unique sitcom is that how it not only completely removed the laugh tracks to maintain its realistic tone, it pretty much was like this perfect representation of the everyday life of your typical average modern day family, which gave it this, you know, my life sucks so I have to deal with it anyways type of philosophy, which made the show so appealing. The show even featured the amazing Bryan Cranston way before he was playing Walter White in Breaking Bad. He was playing Malcolm's fun-loving yet extremely immature father, Hal. Lois and Hal were definitely like my favorite representation of flawed people in a healthy relationship. And while of course it's definitely far from perfect, but they could get through a lot with each other with dedication and remembering that they truly care and love one another. As I got older, I've come to realize how extremely underappreciated Lois was, because after all, she held the entire family together, especially when she was just doing housework and just doing her job, busting her ass. And while Hal is the parent that everybody wants, Lois is the parent that every person needs. And while sure, the later seasons is kind of where the show sort of lost its spark, especially how most of the characters lost their charm, but besides all that, Malcolm in the Middle is such a great sitcom that holds up to this day, and it shows you that sure, life is unfair, but you have to keep fighting to get where you want to be in life. Now, if you ask most people what is their favorite Spider-Man TV show of all time, I guarantee most of them would definitely say Spectacular Spider-Man, and for good reason, because that show was fucking brilliant. But for me, it'll always be the 90s TV series, because this is a show that I used to watch all the time, and I literally mean all the time when I was a toddler. Not only did this show make me the gigantic Spider-Man fanatic that I am to this very day, this was a show that got me into comic books. Like, this show was just everything to me when I was a kid. Spider-Man the Animated Series was such a killer show that features some of Spidey's most classic comic book story arcs and dynamics translated into solid serialized storytelling, rooting itself in the long saga of the MJ-Peter relationship. It was a series that superbly nailed Spider-Man's vast comic world while telling a dazzling human story beyond the comic book villains and superpower action. With the show's brilliant storytelling and writing, it had such a phenomenal way of digging deep into the character's psychology by always creating genuine human emotion to all of the characters, not just Peter Parker alone, but also the side characters and even the villains as well. Plus, this show had such a phenomenal voice cast of actors, from Ed Asner as J. Jonah Jameson, Jennifer Hale as Felicia Hardy, the late great Joan Lee as Madam Web. They even had the amazing Mark Hamill as the Hobgoblin, but most importantly, they had Christopher Daniel Barnes as Spider-Man / Peter Parker himself. To me, he will forever be the voice of Spider-Man, because I remember just being a very young kid reading Spider-Man comics, and I would always imagine his voice talking while I was reading it. And while sure, by today's standards, the show does feel a bit dated, especially when it comes to the dialogue. And yeah, some of the aspects did feel a bit clunky here and there, but there's no denying that Spider-Man the Animated Series is one of the best animated TV shows that Marvel has ever produced, and it'll forever hold a special place in my heart. Now, this may be just my humble opinion, but for my money, Avatar: The Last Airbender is without question the #1 greatest animated TV series of all time. Yes, I said it, of all time. You fucking heard me. Why, you ask? Because I thought pretty much everything about the show was just pure perfection. I'll never forget watching the series premiere when I was very young, and my mind was just completely blown because it was unlike anything, and I literally mean like anything I've ever seen in an animated TV show. There were just so many aspects that made the show so engaging, from the magnificent storytelling to the dazzling animated visuals, and of course the amazing characters, because literally every character on the show is the best character. And especially Zuko, who in my opinion was probably the best character of the entire show, especially just by seeing his incredible redemption arc throughout the series. Well, some people could just look at this show and say that it's just for kids, but I would say that you're dead wrong, because I think it's for both kids and adults, because this show has a lot of themes that not only caters to the younger audience, but to the older audience as well. It's a show that also addresses subjects relating to war, imperialism, gender discrimination, genocide, and even racism. Not 1 second of an episode is ever wasted on meaningless moments. Even the most minor of plot points has a significance of overarching a story. This show would even have a spin-off series, The Legend of Korra, and as great as that was, it just didn't quite hold a candle to how magnificent The Last Airbender was. And for anybody who hasn't seen this show yet, then I beg you, you need to, because it's a show that will definitely be worth your time. And while it was very close to topping my list, but of course, that would be Yep, that's right. My #1 favorite TV show is, of course, The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. The very show that made Will Smith the Hollywood megastar that he is today. Now, this probably shouldn't come as a surprise for most of y'all who've been following my channel for the longest time, and I know this one came off to be basic as hell, but come on. Who doesn't love this fucking show? Throughout my life, there's been no other TV show that I've rewatched the most other than The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. Now, of course, I didn't grow up in the 90s watching this show because I was born like nearly 4 years after the show went off the air in 96, but I always remember growing up just watching the reruns of the show, whether if it was like on TBS, BET, or even Nick at Night. This show was just packed with so many hilarious, so many memorable moments, like every time DJ Jazzy Jeff always got thrown out the house by Uncle Phil, which became his signature, the time when the original Aunt Viv showed off her amazing dancing skills in ballet class, the time when Will caught his mom having sex while he was screaming "Mama, no," or even Carlton running around the set crying. Like, I could keep going on forever and ever. Even with The Fresh Prince being a comedy, one thing I absolutely loved about the show is that it was never afraid to take any risk, especially how it never shied away by tackling serious issues, because when shit got real in the show, shit got real. Like the time when Ashley and Hillary were having a heart-to-heart sister talk while addressing Ashley's virginity, the time when Will got shot by a burglar who tried to rob him and Carlton for their money. But the most memorable one of all was the episode in season 4, Papa's Got a Brand New Excuse, where you had Will's father returning after a 14-year absence, only for him to leave again, which causes Will to break down in tears, realizing that Uncle Phil was his real father figure all along. And this is where Will Smith is at his best, possessed, whereas he gives such a phenomenal performance because we as an audience feel so bad for him, because especially when the part where he says, "How come you don't want me, man?" Like, I literally cannot rewatch that scene without shedding a tear, because that always gets me. The Fresh Prince is essentially everything that I want in a black sitcom, with an incredible lead character, an amazing cast of characters, spot on humor, and plus, who could forget about the catchy theme song? It's probably like the most widely known show opening in sitcom history, and I will fight anybody who disagrees with me on that. But anyways, I just absolutely love The Fresh Prince. Just absolutely love it to death, which is why it is undoubtedly my #1 favorite TV show of all time.